I want you all to build more sustainable products. That does not just mean, as we heard, going slower, but actually that was a good approach. No, of course, I mean this in the sense of being more eco-friendly. I'll get to what this has to do with the IT space, but I want to start first with reminding you of we're in the midst of a climate crisis. And I hope, or I think I know that in this audience, you might not be these kinds of people, but I know you all have these friends who say, well, climate crisis, isn't this a bit dramatic? Climate has been changing all the time. And of course, there's an XKCD comic for this situation. So if you find yourself in a conversation with people like this, show them this comic that plots the changing temperature of Earth over thousands of years. And yes, it has been changing, sure. But that's not why we call it crisis. We call it a crisis because of what's happened in the recent decades, which is a, well, slight deviation. If I would look at the metric in one of my servers and it's flat all the time and suddenly makes a jump like this, the next thing that would go up is my heart rate. So looks bad on a global scale. Maybe that's just somewhere else. We're in cozy Austria, we have the mountains, we have so many forests, can't be that bad where we live, right? Something we like to cope with or to cope with these topics. Actually, in Austria, it's even worse. We're already 2 degrees above the pre-industrial era air temperature. So yeah, it's bad here as well, and it will get worse. I actually wanted to start this talk by pointing out how this summer might be one of the coolest summers you will ever experience in your life. Let that one sink in. And I have data to show it, or I have data that confirms that yes, there will be more dry seasons, more dry days. But then, of course, you all know what happened 2 weeks ago, not even. It rained a lot. It rained so much, or the amount of rain it usually has over 9 months or so in just a few days. But the models show this as well. And you see we're in both categories in the region that will be most affected. What this graphic means in short is the extremes will get more extreme. It can get hotter in the Sahara. So yeah. Speaking of extreme things, recently my team went to the Prater for a team event and we did a roller coaster ride. But the graphic I'm going to show you next really made me feel worse than any roller coaster. It's from the IPCC, and if you want to have good facts on anything climate, IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, this is really the source to go to. It's a UN body, and they compile all the current climate science. And since this is a very dry and hard to digest report, they also do compressed reports like summaries for policymakers. So if you think who's a policymaker, if they are able to comprehend it, I think we can all do this as well. If you're more into audiobooks, there is not an audiobook version of it, but if you're speaking German, there's a good podcast I can recommend. It's called Das Klima by Florian Freistetter and Claudia Frick. They read the whole thing, so you don't need to, and they compile the best parts of it. Okay, so here's that graphic. You might have heard that we wanted to limit the change of Earth's average temperature to 1.5 degrees. Well, there's a budget that we kind of already spent. So let's look at what are the policies we implemented to limit the greenhouse gas emissions, because that's what this line is showing, global greenhouse gas emissions. So if we continue using all the policies we already implemented, well, this line will stay on a pretty high level, and it will lead to about 3 degrees or 3.5 degrees in increase in global temperature. If we do all the things that countries said they will do, we will land in this region, which might even be too much to still hit the 2-degree limit. So we have a lot to do if we really want to still achieve this 1.5-degree limit. This line goes below 0 because it might be necessary to even pull out carbon from the air again, which we don't know yet how to do on a big scale, which is why people are in the streets and they want to see action right now. Now, the next argument one of these friends will make is, well, it doesn't matter what policies we come up with when there is Eastern Asian countries who pollute way more than we do. And yes, they do now, but that's only half of the story. Actually, they are currently on a better track towards hitting their climate goals than we are. So it's a bit, yeah, we shouldn't point at them and say they are polluting so much when, if we look at the historic or how much we've already polluted in the past, like the cumulative since 1850, we're still ahead of them. So it's a bit unfair to now point at them and say, oh, they're polluting so much. I mean, just look at where your devices are built and then ask again why they are polluting so much. Well, you can always vote with your money. I'll come to that later. Now let's get to the IT sector. Did we lose it? Oh, no, just another black slide. Yeah, for more dramatic effect if you're not depressed enough already. Let's get to the IT sector. So a year ago, I did a similar talk, and back then I dunked on the cryptocurrencies because, well, they're burning the planet. And I thought, come on, this hype is now over. Well, graphics cards prices have still not dropped. I see Mario, who recently built a new gaming PC. So yeah, you know what I'm talking. So I thought that hype would be over now, but I couldn't be further from the truth. Bitcoin now burns enough more. Back then I compared it to Austria. Now it's closer to Poland, where we also have labs, by the way. So just think of it. We put another country on the earth in terms of energy consumption. And this is all because our combined effort to burn energy for, well, cryptocurrencies. It's not just cryptocurrencies that's worrying me. If you look at data centers and their energy usage, up until recently, the improvements in efficiencies in data centers kind of made up for the increased demand for them. But as the International Electricity Agency, I can't remember all the three-letter acronyms, I'm sorry. But this is a good source for all kinds of data on energy. They predict that, you see, just in the span of 4 years, we will double the amount of energy we need. And this is to a big part because of the increased usage of AI and because crypto is still going strong. Okay. I also think this might be because of Worth's law, if you heard of that. It states that software is becoming slower more rapidly than hardware is becoming faster. So because we're building worse and worse software, it adds to the demand on data centers. All right, now you're all depressed, now you're all demotivated, but that's not where I want you to leave this. I want to make you understand that you can be part of the solution. And I showed you all these dramatic graphics because I want you to understand how urgent the situation is and how urgent it is to solve it. So I personally also find a bit of hope in the fact that we screwed up the climate in this short amount of time, because if we can make this big of an impact unintentionally over just a few decades, we might be able to fix it even faster if we put our minds to it. Okay, now, of course, a single individual can't change much. That's what we think. But I want you to know that your influence might be greater than you think it is. Okay, before we go into the IT sector, let's think first of what's the biggest impact any individual can do. So yes, you can travel less, you can maybe try to eat less meat. One thing you can do just this weekend, if you're an Austrian citizen, is to go and vote, because as we saw, these policies need some more changing. If you don't know what to vote yet, boy, do I have the website for you. But there's also another vote you can do. just the day after that. And the day after that, you can every day vote with your money on what products you buy, what clothes you buy, what things you pull out of the shelves, because these are the things that get produced. And we all know where they are produced. All right. Now let's get into the IT sector. First decision there, you can decide where you work, what to work for. We're in a lucky position to kind of choose our workplace. Well, yes, I know the market has changed, but still, I think we're still in a privileged position. And now, for all you platform engineers, I think what we can change is what is the default of the systems our company is using, like these golden paths, as we just heard in the previous talk, setting the standards. You probably heard of something called the default bias. And we know it is strong because it's the reason that Bing is still around and Internet Explorer and Safari has more users than I think it should, but I don't want to dunk on browsers here. So by shaping the default, our influence influences all the teams that use the golden path, that create services the way we made them. People will always gravitate towards picking the easy route. So if we are the ones building the road, we need to make sure that the easy route is also the right route, or the more sustainable one. And this means we might want to put like resource limits towards the lower end of the spectrum and make people go the extra mile if they want to increase it. Maybe not every service needs to have 3 replicas if those 3 replicas end up on the same physical machine anyways. At the same time, I know this is kind of contradicting, so don't blame me afterwards. We need to stay a bit flexible. If we just have one narrow golden path, we might force teams to build inefficient solutions, because not everything can be solved with Spring Boot and Postgres databases. A lot can, but yeah. So yeah, I don't want to go too much into tools. The other talks are covering this way better than I could. But stay open, open-minded, have an open ear to all your developers. Understand what is they need, so you can build platforms that support them the best way and allow them to build efficient solutions. Now, I know not every one of you is deciding where your platform is going to be hosted, but you might be the people who will be consulted when it comes to those decisions. And ideally, you make data-driven decisions by consulting sources like the electricity map that can tell you where, in which countries the energy mix is currently the greenest. You might be really fancy and build systems that scale in these countries. So, I mean, it doesn't matter that much for your latency if you're hosting in France or in Germany, but it can make a big difference when it comes to how much carbon your servers will produce. Once you made the decision of where to host, you want to make sure your servers are heavily utilized. And don't add artificial utilization like adding crypto miners or whatever on there. I mean, make sure you don't have machines idling. And there is a very simple graphic that explains why. Because even if you don't use a server, it takes up energy. So since energy usage and utilization don't, it's not a linear correlation. The more usage you make out of every machine, the more energy efficient your system becomes. Let's also talk about scaling. Who here has a system that scales depending on its demand? Hands up. Okay. And who has a system that is also able to scale to 0? Nice. So we heard some of us are lucky enough to have a testing system. If you want to try that out, maybe this separate testing system, if you own one, is a good place to start. I hope your developers don't need to work on Saturdays or Sundays or during night hours. So just using a tool like KubeCreen allows you to maybe shut down workloads for specific periods of time. Or I know you know this stuff better than me. Your cloud provider can have schedules where they provision stuff or shut it down. And again, if you want to be really fancy, you would use a tool like Keda that can use external data to make the decision on when to scale and also how to scale to zero, because that's what the usual pod autoscalers and these things cannot do. So, you know, there are tools out there. I know you will run into architects that maybe prevent you from building this, but now maybe sustainability can be an argument you bring to the table when it comes to whether or not you should build these solutions. So drain those nodes that are not used or shut down as many as you can when your clusters are not utilized. And of course, this is true for non-Kubernetes platforms as well. Now, I said our impact might be greater than we think it is. And I think this is especially true in the IT sector, because just as our systems might be scalable, the improvements that we make can be, or they scale as well. I recently, of this website, Wahlkabine.at, shaved off 0.5 megabyte for every page load. And that's not much, but it scales by the number of users. And for every future year this thing is running, it just takes less data and less energy. And even if you don't have users who are using your service, maybe you're building a library, then also there, every megabyte you decrease of the size of the library will be data saved for every download. And you know, libraries get distributed by the people who download it from you. So it all scales by the users. If you're a platform engineer, every improvement you make to the golden path will be a benefit for every team that uses it. Which also brings me to make sure to train all the other teams in using your platform the way it is intended to, that they are aware of the improvements you make. And speaking of features of good platforms, I couldn't make this talk without also mentioning observability, which should be a feature of your platform. Yes, you, maybe as the creator of a platform, want to know how it's doing, what your dev teams are doing with it, if they're using it the right way. But if you train them how to use your observability tools themselves, they can spot all the ways their services are inefficient, or where there are the performance bottlenecks, optimize their services and make them more efficient and more sustainable. So again, something that multiplies. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know you might have way better ideas than I have. If you have plans for projects that might go beyond your company or your organization, you might want to reach out to these guys. There's a technical advisory group on environmental sustainability of the CNCF. So this is, again, how you could build projects that have an impact way beyond just your company. Or you can contribute to the projects that are already in that group. All right. So as I said before, we can't save the world on our own. But as developers, I think our influence is maybe even greater than that of other other industries or in other areas. So don't just take away the dire graphics from the first part of this talk. Know that you can be part of the solution. And I hope you leave this talk and convince the people in your company to build more sustainable products.